The Podcast Lawyer Live is brought to you by Easy Legal for Podcasters. All the legal and business forms and templates you'll need to keep your podcast on the straight and narrow at podcastlawforms.com. All right, hello everybody. It is Thursday, April 1st, 2021, and I am Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer. And this is the Podcast Lawyer Live, where each Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific time, I answer your legal questions about podcasting. And today, well, no, today's no exception. If you've got a question, you can drop it right into the comments here on the post, and I'll get to it, or you can reach out to me separately, privately, and I'll cover it in a future episode. If you're watching on replay and you want a question answered, drop it in the comments here. I will see it. I will get notified, and I will address it in a future episode of the Podcast Lawyer Live. So, even if you don't have a question, I hope you'll chime in the comments so you can let me know who's here today. Say hello, let me know who's with me, either live or with a hashtag replay. Let me know that you're watching. And to get started, well, I thought, until I have some questions coming in, it looks like I have a few people watching. That's great. But until we get some questions coming in, I thought I'd share some big breaking news in the entertainment industry, in copyright law today. It seems that Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell has introduced Senate Bill 4121, titled Protecting America's Greatest Treasures Act of 2021. The new bill finds that this is a quote, any uncompensated access to intellectual property undermines the fabric of society, close quotes, and will lead to untold very bad things, according to Mr. McConnell. In addition, Congress believes that we as a country have an obligation to think of the children, and that's why all network engineers are classed as enablers of online copyright infringement, and therefore they have to monitor their networks and report violations immediately. The bill also sets up a cultural protection administration that, quote, shall protect the interests of members as such members are the true standard bearers of everything that is great and good about America, says McConnell. One of the commission's jobs, this administration's jobs, is going to be to screen films for congressional staff and Those screenings, according to co-sponsor Elizabeth Warren, should take place to the extent possible in luxurious and yet intimate theaters. That's interesting. The administration would also be charged with monitoring podcasts for wrongful, this is where it affects us, monitoring podcasts for wrongful abuse of the fair use provisions of the Copyright Act, and would set up an extrajudicial enforcement system for the prevention of repeated acts of infringement by drastic measures like throttling offender internet access down to about 300 baud. That's the speed that modems had back in the early 90s. Wow. Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is on board with all this too. He says that he expects unprecedented bipartisan support for this bill to protect America's largest export, entertainment, and to take media in the direction of safe, balanced, wholesome content once and for all. Wow. That is something else. I don't even know what to say about this. I mean, the principles that are being espoused sound really good. The approach is sort of interesting. I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens. It is, of course, a legislative process, so we'll know more when we know more. But interesting that there's this bipartisan discussion, right? I mean, who knows? Who would have expected this? Well, meanwhile, continuing with the news, over in the European Union, legislation has been introduced that would dramatically alter the length and scope of copyright protection, taking things back to a more sensible time frame, according to Belgian Commissioner Peter Peck-Arwood. The new duration of copyright would be limited to 35 years from the date the work is first conceived or imagined. And because the U.S. is signatory to the International Berne Convention, the Berne Convention, that is the international copyright law, we would have to conform our copyright law to similar time frame or risk being excluded from certain kinds of trade relations. So it's been a big day. And some of you might have seen this one. I don't have a picture. There was a letter, but the Walter Disney Company has apparently begun sending out cease and desist letters to podcasters who use or refer to characters from the Disney stories and attractions. And I got my hands on one such letter, and they're talking about what I actually think is a fairly reasonable approach. So with the tip of my hat to Michael Troy, who brought this to my attention just this morning, let me read you just a little bit of this letter. Here's what it says. It says, "It has come to Disney's attention that the American Revolution podcast has been using characters and storylines associated with Disney's intellectual property. Specifically, the podcast has made repeated uses of the characters of George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and James Madison, all of whom are characters found in Disney's Hall of Presidents. And additionally, references to the Boston Tea Party, Paul Revere's Ride, and the battles of Lexington and Concord are all plot points that occur in the Disney motion picture Johnny Tremaine. Therefore, your actions constitute blatant and egregious infringement of Disney's valuable intellectual property rights, and Disney is demanding that this person immediately cease and desist from further unauthorized display, promotion, distribution, and all other uses of any recorded audio or images containing these characters or other intellectual property owned by Disney." And that goes on to demand that the offending material be removed and that all who've downloaded have to be notified. Now, that's a pretty bold demand. But they're not asking for money, and they're really talking about trying to educate folks about the copyright law by letting everybody know what's happened. So I think that might be a reasonable approach, but I want to know what you think. What do you think? So let's see what we've got in the comments. Ed is here saying, "Oh, thank you, Ed. This is nice. You're getting it together, and it looks sharp. How come it's not actually showing up in the broadcast? There we go. There it goes. There's Ed. You're getting it together, looking sharp. Let me make that a little bigger for future. It's not working. I'll do it on the next one." And then he says, "Wow, would that cover all work in the past?" Ed, I'm missing it. What cover all work in the past? The copyright duration change in the EU? It hasn't been addressed yet. I honestly don't know what the answer to that would be. Here it is. It's just, the first day of April in 2021. It'll be a while before this law can be put into effect anywhere, but something we should be watching out about. And Rob. Oh, Rob, this is a good question, Rob. Aren't those historical characters? You're talking about Washington and Adams and Jefferson and Madison. Yeah, they are. But once they're embodied in a work of fiction or a stage creation like the Hall of Presidents or something like that, Disney seems to be claiming ownership of them. And boy, that's interesting, isn't it? So I don't know. What do you guys think? What do you guys think about all of this? It's yeah. I mean, so that's the news for today. But I'm waiting. I'm looking for questions. Looking for questions. Anybody have questions about any of this stuff? Anybody want to come on the show with me? I can try to open up the conversation a little more. Who else is here watching? If you haven't chimed in and said hello, please do so. Well, it's just Ed and Rob, it looks like right now. So, yeah, thanks to Ed for the compliment about getting it together. The studio's looking good. I'm feeling good about how things are flowing and the show rundown and all that. And, well, you know what? Let me just do one thing real quickly here. I just want to share with you that the show is brought to you by Legit Podcast Pro. If you're not already a member of this, my private group here on Facebook, you can come back and join Legit Podcast Pro. Go to legitpodcastpro.com. And we're talking about these kinds of issues more in there than I do just the once a week. I'm going to sneeze. Bless me. All right. So what are you doing? Can you believe that the first quarter of the year is already over? The end of quarter one happened yesterday, and we are into Q2 already. Did you hit your goals? Did you do what you wanted to do? Ed says very professional. Thank you. Thank you. What do you have going on? What do you want to work on in quarter two? Are you, have you launched your show? You want to do something in terms of growth, whatever else? Rob says, what if I include Marilyn Monroe in a work of fiction called, I can't read it, hold on, Hall of Blondes? Does she now become my intellectual property? Wow, you're onto something here, Rob. The way your portrayal of Marilyn turns out, the dialogue that you create for Marilyn, maybe the design of the costumes and makeup and things, I suppose it's possible. This is, fairly aggressive on Disney's part, of course. And, interesting timing of their letter being made public today. So I don't know what to make out of all of that. But, yeah, thanks for asking the question. It's an interesting dilemma. I don't think this is intended. Look, we should not be able to copyright a character from history. We shouldn't be able to copyright a fact from history. Otherwise, we would be, someone would be able to take words out of the lexicon and information. The news would be copyrighted, and one network couldn't tell the news that the other network told, and things like that. So it just can't work. So yeah, that's an astute observation, Rob. Yeah, what else? What else is there to talk about today? This is totally unrelated to podcasting and law and anything else, but I am doing a challenge. I have decided that starting today, I am going no caffeine and no added or refined sugar in my diet. And I'm going to do this every day. I'm actually going to do a live on my personal page or my personal feed. I'm going to do a nightly sort of real quick diary entry just to talk about what I've been experiencing. And today's been the first day. Of course, last night I, for some reason, was up super late, could not sleep. And so I was up till like 3 and then had to get up with the kids at 6:30 this morning, 6:45 this morning. And so I'm falling down. I haven't had any caffeine. All I'm drinking is my SodaStream seltzer water. SodaStream, good stuff. Yeah, cold turkey. Yeah, and this is no April Fool's joke, I'll tell you, man. It is, the headache is upon me. I'm exhausted. I'm looking forward to going to bed, probably right after I finish this live. It's 4:15 in the afternoon? I could do that. Ed says Disney must be talking about their depiction of the characters. Yeah, well, that seems to be what they're talking about. But how does a podcast talking about these historical characters in the context? I mean, the show is called the Revolutionary War Podcast, or the American Revolution Podcast, or something like that, right? American Revolution Podcast. So how could that be about the characterizations created? I mean, unless you hear what Disney's version of George Washington says, yeah. And yeah, so my caffeine-free thing. Yeah, I am strong no coffee. You know what? The truth is, I don't like the taste of coffee, so I've never been a coffee drinker. But normally, I would mix this with some syrup to make a Diet Cola, and that would be my sip on it all day kind of, or at least until lunchtime kind of a beverage. Today, it's been nothing but seltzer, and it hurts. It hurts. The pain, the horror. It's definitely a thing. My wife is, she said, send help, please. The kids and she are going to have to deal with me for the next couple of weeks while I detox from caffeine and sugar. I have to wonder, should I do this simultaneously or should I have done one at a time? Did they show the image on the cover art? Honestly, I don't know, Ed. I don't know what the letter is all about. I'm just sort of reporting it as I see it on the first day of April. So there it is. There it is. What else is there to talk about today? What's going on with you guys? Fill me in. What's new? Anybody seen any other? I mean, we always have the usual questions. Can I use a song in my podcast? Can I use an opening, 8 bars of a song as my intro for my show? Those kinds of things. And you know the answer by now. Anybody who pays attention to what I have to say knows you can't. You can't unless it's fair use, and it mostly isn't. But yeah, I'm intrigued by this what do you call it? The U.S. New bill. This, what's it called? The Protecting America's Greatest Treasure, PAGTA of 2021. That seems odd that they wouldn't have chosen a name that was more of an acronym. That finds that uncompensated access to intellectual property undermines the fabric of society. Wow. And that bipartisan support. I mean, come on. What's that all about? Rob says, let me move this over here where I can look at it more. You are a lawyer and use your name personally and professionally. Where'd it go? Probably in some sort of professional corporation. How does a podcaster separate their personal use of their name and professional use? For instance, how do I legally separate... oops, I lost it. Got to find it again. Hang on. How do I separate my personal Facebook account and my professional content creator account, but using my name in both? Rob, I think you just do it. I have a personal identity, of course, as Gordon, but I am pretty wrapped up in my personal identity and my business identity. And, for my legal work, it's law offices of Gordon P. Firemark or the podcast lawyer. I do have these brands. I do not have a professional corporation set up to create that separateness. It's just me, tracking it and keeping things legit and honest. So how do you legally separate? You can form entities if you're worried about legal separation. But if you have a business Facebook page or account, I think it can have the same name as a user. Mine is distinguished because, one of my business pages is under my name with my middle initial. So, yes, Ed says that new bill makes me worry about the free internet. Podcasting being limited in scope can change everything. Indeed. Something to worry about, not something... we got to watch it. We got to watch out for it. The good news is these kinds of things don't happen overnight. And I'm sure by tomorrow, everything will have shifted and people will be thinking a little differently about these things. And we don't have to worry that it's going to go out the way it was described in this media release that I have here. But boy, if they're all on board with it, this worries me. Yeah, you got a good point. So, Let me get my comments back where I can see them. So, Rob, did I answer your question about separateness? I hope I did. I'm only going to stick around for another minute or two. Unless you've got other burning legal questions. We've got the music question always coming up. We've got the title of the show question that always comes up. We've got the should I use a podcast release question that comes up an awful lot. Actually, I am going to open up my little list where I keep the questions that come in because I have some other questions that I want to talk to you about from another day. Rob says, yes, I answered. Okay, so let's see. This one came up in I think it was the Podcast Movement Community Facebook group. If there's a public hearing with legislators asking questions and people testifying in support or against a proposed bill, is that YouTube video considered in the public domain? Can anyone use clips of it? Can anyone use clips of it to include in their podcast then with attribution and a link to the original and so on? Can they comment on the testimony of the legislative responses? Thank you. Well, the short answer is it depends. If it's a video that was posted by C-SPAN on their YouTube channel and it came from a official federal government hearing or something like that, then it's work of the United States government and it would not be entitled to any copyright protection. But if you or I go to a public hearing at a meeting and videotape it, which is our right, and then post it on YouTube later on, that video belongs to you or I, the videographer. And so while the content, the hearing, was a publicly available event, and most states have these, government in the sunshine laws, the fact that I made my videotape from the angle I did using the choices and the zoom lens and all the things that I've made choices about, I have a copyright in my video and I don't have to let you use it for free. Now, as a practical matter, you probably get away with it. And if you're getting a video from an official government source, certainly at the federal level, because the United States government is not entitled to copyright protection for government works, you're good to go. But each state is going to handle things a little differently, and there are some bubbling, simmering disputes right now between states and private entities, private nonprofits and organizations, claiming that states should not be able to limit access to the laws, for example. And the Supreme Court ruled on a couple of those last year, dealing with an outfit called what was it called? Public Citizen, I believe is the name of the outfit. And they wanted to get access to some state laws that were being restricted. And I think they found in favor of the public. So California has a similar thing going on with certain of its codes. Legislatures have basically adopted codes that have been written by private organizations, and once the legislature adopts it, that becomes the state law. So you shouldn't have to buy a copy of that law. In this case, it's a building code. You shouldn't have to buy a building code from the publisher of that building code. Once the state says this is our law, it's state information. And yeah, you can go to the library, but if you want to have a copy on your desk, they're charging thousands of dollars for this thing. It's a multi-volume set, so it's crazy. So so back to the official public hearings. Depends on your state. Depends who made the video. Was it a public access station? Was it a private citizen, or was it an official government agency that made the video? Just got to check those channels and ask the question before you go there. All right, well, that's going to be it for today. I'm going to wrap it up now, and I'm just going to remind you about those other stories that I mentioned to you a few minutes ago. Just to tell you, happy April Fool's Day, and I'll see you again next week when we wrap up, and I'll be back to my normal kind of programming. Have a great one. See you.